Well, hello everybody, and welcome to tonight's edition of The Great Movies, a discussion of Sunset Boulevard from 1950, directed by Billy Wilder. Before we get into that discussion, my name is Andy Wolverton, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by my co-host and partner in crime, Darnice Jasper. Darnice and I are both librarians in the Anne Arundel County, Maryland Public Library System, which sponsors this program. So our next virtual meeting is going to be on Friday, December the 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern, when we will discuss Monsieur Hulot's Holiday from 1953. And you can sign up for that event starting today. And let me put that in the chat for you. And there it is. Okay. So don't forget, that is on December the 3rd. Then our final discussion for 2021 will be on Friday, December the 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern, when we discuss HUD from 1963, starring Paul Newman, Patricia Neal, and Melvyn Douglas. Now, a little bit of explanation. This wasn't a scheduled movie, but HUD is a movie I'd hoped would be part of a Western mini festival I was planning for 2022, but Canopy had other ideas. I was going to do HUD, High Noon, and Shane. High Noon and Shane have both been taken off of Canopy. So much for my plans, which says a lot about my 2021 plans in general. So that film HUD expires from Canopy at the end of 2021. So I'm going to sneak it in there as our final movie discussion for the year. And let me put that one into the chat right now as well. And okay, there we have it. Okay, so if you are new to our discussions, we are so glad to have you along. And if you'd like to join our email list, please send me an email at awolverton@aacpl.net. And Darnice is way ahead of me as usual. That way you'll get all the news about our upcoming programs before anyone else. Also, please know that we want as many people participating as possible tonight. So if you have a question or a comment, please raise your real hand or your virtual hand, or use the chat feature, and Darnice will work you into the conversation. We also ask that you please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Okay, so we have a few new people, but I think for the most part, it's veterans. Do we have any questions before we continue? Okay, great. So we are going to jump right into our discussion. Before we do, I wanted to know how many people watched Sunset Boulevard for the very first time in preparation for tonight's discussion? 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right, very good. So most of us have seen it before. So director and screenwriter Billy Wilder and screenwriter Charles Brackett had worked together on several films before Sunset Boulevard, including The Lost Weekend, which won a Best Actor Oscar for Ray Milland. In fact, Wilder and Brackett worked so well together, they were sometimes referred to as the happiest couple in Hollywood. This film would test that relationship. We'll get into that more later. For Sunset Boulevard, Wilder and Brackett enlisted the help of former Life magazine writer D.M. Marshman Jr., who suggested a story involving a relationship between a former silent film star and a young man many years her junior. She lives in the past, reveling in her glory days in a rundown mansion on Sunset Boulevard. The young man is a not very successful screenwriter who's deep in debt and trying to come up with an idea for a bankable script. As Brackett described the silent film star at this point, quote, she was someone who had been given the brush by 30 million fans. And that line is also in the film. Wilder decided to name his character Norma Desmond, a reference to silent film screen star Mabel Normand and silent film director William Desmond Taylor, who was murdered in 1922. Now, Taylor had had affairs with many of his leading ladies, including Mabel Normand. So the name Norma Desmond was not only a good one, it was also relevant. Also, Norman was implicated in Taylor's unsolved murder, so the scandal that ended Taylor's life also ended Norman's career. Billy Wilder, a longtime screenwriter as well as a director, identified with the film's lead, Joe Gillis, played by William Holden. As he did in Double Indemnity in 1944, Wilder has his male protagonist narrate the film, but the situation is a little different this time. William Holden had made a splash, no pun intended, in 1939 with Golden Boy opposite Barbara Stanwyck, but his career had lately been on a downward slide, mostly starring in unremarkable films, many of them westerns. Holden really wasn't confident he could play Joe Gillis, so Wilder asked him, "Do you know Bill Holden? Then you know Joe Gillis." For the part of Norma Desmond, Wilder initially approached Mae West, who refused to play a has-been movie star. She just wasn't going to do it. Mary Pickford was contacted, but she wanted to call all the shots. Finally, friend and fellow director George Cukor suggested silent film star Gloria Swanson, who had played in only a handful of films since the end of the silent era. Swanson was 52 at the time. William Holden, by the way, was 31. Now, unlike Norma Desmond, Gloria Swanson had not gone into seclusion, but she was the host of a New York television talk show. When Wilder asked Swanson for a screen test, she replied, "You want me to do a screen test to see if I'm still alive?" Also in the cast is legendary and self-destructive director Erich von Stroheim. We'll have more to say about him and his performance as Max later. And the film also features several other Hollywood names and faces. Now, since the film was a not so nice look at Hollywood, Wilder had to disguise the true nature of the film while it was in production. The film's working title was A Can of Beans. And Wilder asked everyone involved with the project to tell people that it was a movie based on people Wilder and Brackett had known and worked with in the past. As you might expect, the reaction from many in the Hollywood community was less than agreeable. Again, we'll talk more about that as we discuss the film. Sunset Boulevard was nominated for 11 Oscars, beginning with winning actually for Best Screenplay, Best Black and White Art Direction, and Best Musical Score, but there's a bit of difficulty in categorizing Sunset Boulevard. Some see it as a film noir, perfect for Noirvember, yet others call it a straight drama or a melodrama. Some call it a horror movie, and others a dark comedy. I believe it probably contains elements of all of these, but regardless of how you classify it, Sunset Boulevard has remained popular and relevant, and many consider it a masterpiece. So let's start with that question. What is Sunset Boulevard? Film noir, drama, melodrama, horror, dark comedy? What do you think? Let's hear from
you. Hands, faces. Anyone? Okay, go ahead. Tammy, then Vanessa, then Chuck. Thank you. Get my pen and paper out. Oh, you're still muted, Tammy.
I didn't know, sorry, what to think when it started off with that funeral for the monkey. I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to laugh or be sad or what, but I mean, that definitely set the tone for something. I just wasn't sure what.
Okay, yeah, very true. It's an odd opening.
Very eye-opening.
Okay, who's next?
So Vanessa's next.
I don't think it's a straight out noir, in my opinion. I think the only noir element it really has is the murder by Norma Desmond of William Holden's character. Really, that's the only noir element. That and the narration, like the flashback. That's it.
Okay.
I think to me, it's more of a drama.
Okay. So now we've got Chuck.
Yeah, in my opinion, I'd say it's a film noir, and there's several reasons for that. The first would be the fact that Joe Gillis, the character, has a lot in common with the film noir loser, the kind of this guy who's using Norma Desmond to try to get his fame. He wants to end up, and he ends up dead in the swimming pool he always wanted. And I also kind of view Hollywood itself as kind of like the femme fatale in the film. It basically seduces both, you know, Joe Gillis, who wants to become famous and have a success in Hollywood and be rich and everything that comes with it, and also Norma Desmond, who had all that and now has been cast aside, and basically it just ends up destroying them both. So
Great point. All right, so now we've got Gary.
I vote for Melodrama just because it is just so over the top in absolutely every way. We alluded to some of those things in the amazing performance of Gloria Swanson, where, you know, she starts at 11 and turns it up to 12. And, you know, the Baroque funeral of the monkey and et cetera, just seems like it's almost surreal. And I think it would make a fascinating double feature with Chinatown, because they both have Los Angeles as a key character in the movie, and the notion of betrayal and, you know, layers of corruption.
Okay, yeah, nice point.
Interesting, very good
Yeah.
point. Okay, who's next?
Oh, we got to have more people. Come on. How do you see
Go
it?
ahead, Bill, ask, go ahead.
I'm not quite sure what I decided what it is, but this was my first time seeing it. And by the way, I'm happy to have been part of this group for such a long time, because I'm seeing lots of movies I never would have seen otherwise. So,
Agreed.
so thank you for pointing me in the right direction so often. But I thought even from the beginning, the title, I mean, is the name of Sunset Boulevard's on the curb, like it's like we're in the gutter right from the beginning. Kind of sets the tone for everything that follows. And I love that scene from the swimming pool where the dead body, and you're seeing it from the bottom of the pool, and you're seeing past the body and seeing all the people standing around the pool. I thought that was a fascinating shot that they had. But I was a little confused about the pool, because early on when he moved into the house, the pool was in ruins and there was rats in it and stuff. But somewhere along the line, it suddenly became a wonderful pool. It was like they weren't maintaining the place at all. And they had the money, but they weren't maintaining it. But then all of a sudden they started maintaining at least the pool. I must have missed when they transitioned from not caring for that property to making it a wonderful pool.
It was after the sex, Bill.
That's right.
And I apparently missed that too.
She
I
wanted,
thought for the longest time he was simply there trying to get his career going.
yeah, her new
Yeah.
boyfriend
At one
wanted a
point-
pool and she wanted to see him in swim trunks.
At one point,
yeah, I totally
in
agree
the,
with Dunnies. Yeah.
Go
at one
ahead.
point when she was trying to convince him to stay, or telling him what she was going to do to make him, you know, love her or what have you, she said, "I'll get the pool filled up. We'll get that squared away." So, and then, you know, cut some point later, you know, we went from New Year's Eve to warm weather in a scene or two. So I imagine it happened during
Quickly.
that.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Yeah. Good comments.
You had mentioned something about it being a comedy, and I did laugh more this time when I watched it than the first time. I think I was just so caught up with the grandeur and just the whole idea of it. But watching it for a second time, I saw the absurdity in it, not just in the lifestyles, but just the overacting that wasn't overacting. Do you know what I mean? It was definitely over the top grandeur, but she did it so well. She really did.
Yeah.
She was acting like a silent movie star and talking at the same time, because we've seen a couple of silent movies and you see the over exaggeration of the faces and the movements, and she was just that all the time, and I loved it.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because as I mentioned or alluded to in the introduction, Wilder and Brackett had a falling out over this film. Brackett saw it more as a comedy and wanted to play up the comedic elements more, and Wilder wanted it to get darker and darker and darker. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but there was an original, the beginning of the film is not the original beginning that Wilder shot. And I don't want to spoil it for you because you can find it on YouTube, but the ones I found, the clips I found didn't have any sound, but I'll just say that it starts in a morgue and the test audiences howled in laughter, which is not what Wilder wanted. So they changed that beginning, but you can look it up on YouTube. And if you have the DVD, it may be an extra on your DVD, or the library's DVD may have it as well.
Go ahead, Jen.
Well, when I saw this as a teenager decades ago for the first time I saw it, I looked at it from the perspective of William Holden being caught in this spider's web, where he feels like he is going to outmatch and outmaneuver this sad silent film star. And as I get older, while Gloria Swanson is definitely over the top, there is a vulnerable, pathetic quality to her where I feel for her character. And there are moments in it where you're hoping that it could turn out differently for her. And she has scenes with DeMille where you actually feel a lot for what she's going through, to have been overlooked and kind of cast aside. So as I get older, I see it with a different pair of eyes.
Great point.
Great.
Really.
Susan
Thank
and
you,
then
Jen.
Vanessa.
Yeah.
Susan first and then Vanessa.
Hi. It just occurred to me that if the part of the pathetic thing about Norma Desmond was the age difference, but it got me to thinking, what would happen if it was reversed? What if the woman was younger and the man was that much older? It wouldn't be pathetic anymore. So it's sort of interesting that, and really in real life, she's only like 20 years older, which it's really not that big of an age difference. But we have been conditioned that that's sort of a grotesque situation. And you never get to explore whether or not he was really attracted to her sexually or whether he was just doing it opportunistically. So I wonder what anybody else would think about that.
Okay, yeah, let's open that up.
Vanessa first. Let's get back to Vanessa's question and then we can go back to Susan's question.
I really liked what Jan said, because I've had the same experience. So I first saw this film when I was a teenager, and now I'm 39 years old. And when I watched it last night, I actually sympathized more with Norma Desmond than I did with anyone else in that movie, because regardless of the fact that obviously she's playing a character, Gloria Swanson lived that reality. Every silent film star lived that reality, where once 20 years ago they were the most popular people, they had all the money, they had all the respect, and then 20 years later they had nothing. And it made me really sad when they're playing bridge and there's Buster Keaton and oh, what's her name, Greta Nilsson, I think that's her name. And it made me really sad, thinking that, my God, these actors, these pioneers are filming this movie about becoming so irrelevant in modern day Hollywood. They actually lived that. So that's what really got me last night. I really felt for them.
Yeah, excellent.
So who's next? Let's go back to Susan's question. Jan? Go ahead.
Oh, me?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Oh, I think Joe was totally an opportunist until the very end, when he finally does the right thing with the Betty Schaefer character, and then goes upstairs to finally tell Norma what she can do and how she can still have a life and she cannot accept it. And that seals his doom. I love the comment about switching the ages, because think about the Wilder film a little bit later, Love in the Afternoon, which is Gary Cooper, the older man with incredibly young Audrey Hepburn. And it does work, but it's a little awkward these days. Also, I'd like to jump in on what Vanessa said. Think about the Erich von Stroheim character. It's one of the most interesting characters you're going to find, because he is this has-been silent film director who has been reduced to being her butler and keeping her legacy alive. And he was, for a time, one of the greatest silent film directors before he torpedoed his own career. So he's actually living his life in front of the camera. And as far as I can tell, he had a ball doing the movie and was fascinated about watching Billy Wilder and what he was creating there. And he's playing himself in a way.
Mhm. Yes, yes.
That is interesting. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hi. Okay, just to follow up on the question of the sexual relationship between these two. I'm a little confused by watching this, because to me, although there is certainly a sexual relationship there, I feel it's downplayed somewhat, and it's funny because Billy Wilder was far from being a shy director about that stuff, which, like, if you go back to Double Indemnity, like, sex is basically the core of that whole movie. If you look forward to stuff like The Apartment and Kiss Me Stupid, they're very, very sexual movies. And although, like I said, it's there, but I feel like it's kind of put on the back burner a bit. Like, there's the scene where he comes to her after she's tried to commit suicide, and they fairly plainly have sex right then. And then there's the speech at the end where all of his self-loathing comes out when he's talking to Betty. And he kind of says there, you know, like, it's an older man or a younger man and an older woman, and what do you think we do, you know, or something like that. So I just I think that it seems funny to me that this is Billy Wilder, a guy who was never shy about putting that out front in his movies, but it seemed like it was put a bit on the back burner here. And I'm wondering, and maybe Odie can chime in on this, whether was it just that in 1950, the censors didn't want to deal with a 30-year difference between an older lady and a younger man? Like, just want to get people's thoughts on that.
Good question.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of the Billy Wilder you're thinking about. The dirtier Billy Wilder comes at the expense of IAL Diamond not doing what Brackett did, which is kind of temper Wilder's dirtier instincts, not just for the censor, but just in general. I think they kind of don't have that. I guess perhaps they don't have them, you know, having sex on screen or anything like that, just imply it, simply because perhaps they didn't think the audience could handle that. You know, when it's a man, an older man and a younger woman, that's common. And it's an older woman and a younger man. I'm trying to think of movies that had existed at that time where this would have taken place in 1950. I can think later on, you know, something like Walk on the Wild Side with Barbara Stanwyck going after, you know, a younger female character. But before that, I don't think that such a thing really existed. Maybe pre-code, they allowed this to happen. But by this point, I think that would have been incredibly taboo. But besides Mae West, of course, I got arrested, but that's some of that's also pre-code. Yeah, so I think that's why they didn't show it. I think he didn't think the audience was ready for it. Had this been made after Brackett and Wilder broke up, you know, it probably would have been dirtier. They probably would have, Wilder would have probably made more of a joke out of it, to be honest with you. I think he would have. A dark joke, but a joke nonetheless. That's kind of what I always thought about it.
Jan, you had your hand up? Oh, did we
Yeah.
lose Jan? Oh, there you go. No. Go ahead.
It reminds me of Montgomery Clift's potential involvement in this movie because he passed on it. And I've always believed one reason was he was involved in a relationship with an older woman and it hit a little too close to his personal life. And I really can't see Montgomery Clift in this movie like William Holden is. William Holden nails this movie, and he came out of a decade of doing kind of schlock to suddenly coming into his own.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you see him do a lot of great roles after this. So yeah, you're right on target, Jan.
You know, I wondered, getting back to the relationship, if that wasn't the point of Wilder's story, that, you know, it's assumed and we don't really need to get into it, maybe because the crowd didn't get it, but maybe because that was sort of the seedier side of the relationship, and that was not real, that sort of like fueled Joe's actions, right? And his just the way that he felt. I just assumed that it was one of those like censored things, but I also thought I'm glad they didn't, because it allowed you to wonder. And I think that the unknown part of this whole conversation is or relationship was helping the story. Okay, anybody else? Debbie?
I thought the emphasis was less on the sex between them than on the nature of the place. I mean, when you walk into a stranger's house and somebody says, if you have trouble with the coffin, let me know. Right away, it's like, huh? And then at one point, he actually says, the whole place seemed to be stricken with a kind of creeping paralysis. And I thought that really kind of describes his life. He's sinking into a life of creeping paralysis, really, because he's not going anywhere. He's stuck with this person who is like latched onto him. I mean, literally clutching him at times. And I just really didn't have a sense that he was sexually attracted so much as opportunistic and willing to allow her to guilt him into staying, essentially. And the von Stroheim character, I mean, to me, he was like this enabler for her, you know, to live in this falling apart old mansion and dream of coming back, that sort of thing.
Awesome. Bruce. Bruce? There you go. Nope. You hit it twice. There you go.
Okay, whew. I was thinking right after you called my name, I said, oh gosh, both God and I knew what I was going to say, and now only one of us does. But then it came back. So maybe I'm the prude, maybe I'm the innocent, but I didn't get a strong vibe for a sexual relationship between them. And I'm thinking back to African Queen 1 year later. That was a little more obvious that was the intent of the scene. And I didn't quite get that from here. So I agree with everything else, the opportunistic. I agree that I thought it was a very good point that I think Jan had made, that he shifted his opportunism to maybe some sort of pathos, and then maybe into some sort of strength of doing the right thing. We're not doing her any favors and what have you. But yeah, I just missed that one thing. I bunch of other little observations to make, but we're not on that tack, so I'll reserve them and yield my time.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
All right, somebody else. How about the relationship, sexual or otherwise?
Gary?
Go ahead,
Go ahead, Gary.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
Gary, then Odie.
I also never actually saw it as a consummated sexual relationship. I saw her as being throughout this sexually and emotionally frustrated, more so even emotionally frustrated, because she knows that her hold on Joe is financial, and yet her need for him is so much more, just like her need to be brought back to the studio. And when she has that flicker of thought that they're interested in her, no, it's actually her car, it's sort of a parallel to, it's a false and illusory interest that Joe has in her, and she needs both of those to be real, and neither is. But I just never saw it as a, well, it happened off screen. It's like, no, I don't think it actually happened.
That's really interesting. I never thought about it in quite that way, but I like that.
That is interesting. I never either. I just automatically assumed it because of the how much he allowed her to touch him even more after that kiss, and after it seemed that their whole dynamic changed completely, which to me is kind of a trope thing.
And how uncomfortable he is when she does touch him.
Yes, definitely. Oh, Odie, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think we're overthinking this. Joe Gillis is a man whore. He's a gigolo. And, it's so much easier, it seems, to buy, some woman having a sugar daddy and sleeping with him. Norma Desmond is Joe Gillis's sugar mama. And, you want that money, you put out. And that's the way I saw it. I think it's a sexual relation. Maybe he doesn't want it. I think a lot of times in those types of relationships, you don't want it. But if you don't do it, you don't get what you're looking for. She can put him out. Those creditors will come back and beat Joe Gillis up, put him in the gutter, where we saw the Sunset Boulevard title. So I think we're overthinking this. There obviously is a sexual relationship involved here, whether they want it or not. I think kind of doesn't really play. He's going to do whatever he needs to do until he has a better offer, which he does eventually get a better offer. And then he realized, now I can get away from this woman. But at the point, at New Year's Eve, where Max von Stroheim's character kind of manipulates Joe back to the house, Joe realizes that this is my meal ticket and she's going to kill herself. Then what am I going to do? So I have to do whatever I need to do. And I think that's kind of blatant, that Joe Gillis is willing to do whatever he needs to do to survive. He's very selfish. And I think that's what brings up kind of the noirish aspect of the movie, is that we have a character who is kind of noirish. And in a much nastier movie, he could be Lawrence Tierney.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
Well, Odie, I want to, don't want to forget Jeff, but I want to get into something that that I shared with the group, and Odie knows that I shared his article with the group, and I don't know how many people got to read it, but in that article, Odie talks about the advantages of seeing the film on the big screen, which he also mentioned in the chat, versus seeing it on a television screen, even if it's a wide, big television screen. Odie also has a very interesting take on Norma, especially at the end of the film, that I wanted to talk about a little bit. So Odie, for those of the audience that haven't read your essay, can you give us just a brief rundown of it?
Sure. I wrote this in 2007, before there was such a thing as a hot take. It was kind of a bit of a joke, kind of repurposing Sunset Boulevard and bringing out what I thought was the noir element of it. So my conspiracy theory was that Norma, she knew what she was doing. And we have to take a kind of a Hollywood Babylon look at it, and that in the 20s, the best way to get noticed was to have scandal. And Norma Desmond knew that. And I think Joe Gillis, whether in my conspiracy theory and in the movie itself, I think he's an unreliable narrator, because a lot of times Billy Wilder, the director, is showing you things, showing you empathy toward Norma Desmond that the narration certainly does not have. And so I built upon that, and I talk about Norma Desmond this is calculated. This is not, her insanity is calculated. Once she kills Joe Gillis, she realizes, I'm going to go to jail, but my public is back. And they think I'm crazy anyway. I'm having funerals for monkeys. So why not just play this up? And so that was kind of my theory, was that Norma was in love with Joe. There was a sexual relationship. Joe was a gigolo who took advantage of her. And then when he found a better writer in Nancy Olson, he dumped her. And nobody leaves a star, so she shot him. And so I took it and built up that whole noir element of it. And it was a joke, but as I wrote it, I realized that it kind of made sense. It fit a reading of Sunset Boulevard. And I thought, I don't necessarily believe that Norma's not crazy at the end of the movie, but I feel like my little conspiracy theory gave her a better ending than what she got in the movie. You know, a more femme fatale-ish ending. That there was, you know, this noirish element of, I got you. You thought you were pulling one over on me.
And Odie, that was an outstanding essay. And I think that brings up one of the things that I think we all recognize about the film, that it has such depth and the characters are so well written that we can even have this conversation about was Norma crazy, or did she know exactly what she was doing?
The other thing is about on the big screen, there's a scene where she is watching the silent movies with Joe, and she stands up, and it's just her and the beam of light from the projector lighting her. And on television, it doesn't really play, but in a darkened theater, it's a completely different experience. It's just her. It's almost like she says, me, you and me and the people out there in the dark. It becomes like that line that she says has that visual representation on the screen. You're in a really dark theater, and when she stands up and the light illuminates her, it's just her. And like the sky, like she's the moon in the sky, and that's all you see. And it's fascinating, but it's also terrifying that the movie plays so differently. And Billy Wilder was notorious for saying that he was a better writer than a director. And he said, if someone tells you something is well shot, that's proof that it isn't. I think he's much harder on himself as a visual stylist than I would be. And Sunset Boulevard is the proof. If you watch it on the big screen, it's a horror movie. On television, you kind of get the humorous aspects of it. But visually, he's making a kind of a German expressionist horror movie. And it's in a lot of the scenes where Norma Desmond is kind of reverting to her silent film, you know, heyday. He shoots a lot of that in a very, very, you know, kind of scary, you know, framing.
Yeah, great. Thoughts about that? There's a lot in there. What's your thoughts?
Okay, so Jeff, and then Margaret.
I'm glad Odie made the point of Joe being an unreliable narrator. I think this is probably the fourth or fifth time I'd seen it, and that was something I honed in on this time, because there's the element throughout the movie where Joe keeps telling her, I don't want that gift. Don't give me that gift. But he doesn't say no to a single damn one of them. Like he takes the Vicuna coat, he takes the gold cigarette case. And yeah, I've never not seen him as a cad in this movie. I wanted to touch on a very tiny little scene, which I always noticed, but I've never really heard it mentioned before. And that's when he leaves her house at New Year's Eve. He's wearing that very fancy coat, and he goes to Jack Webb's party. And, you know, he's talking away to them, and he takes the coat off and just rolls it in a ball, like a piece of scrap paper, and stuffs it in the bookcase. And I thought, you know, that's what her gift means to him. You know, he's just such a dickhead, and just to treat that beautiful gift to him like that, that probably cemented my opinion of him the very first time I saw the movie. But I've never seen anybody ever mention that.
That's interesting.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Margaret, welcome. Hi.
Hi, y'all. Thank you. I just wanted to share. I made a cigarette.
Did you? Good for you.
It's a pencil and a curtain clip. So
All right.
I just wanted to share that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Great.
So when Odie was talking about like the darkness, that was the one thing I found really interesting. Because I know this movie's in black and white, but every time I turn it on, I'm like, oh, it's not in color. Like, wait. And I think it's because of, like, when I was watching it, there's so many things that are like super white and super black, and there's so many colors in between. So I really was kind of fascinated with the different colors and how much junk there was everywhere, like how much stuff there was, like in her shrine, it was like all these different shapes and textures. And so I thought that was like really interesting. So I definitely would like to see this on the big screen, because I think it would be even more interesting.
Great.
Great to have you here, Margaret.
Thank you all. Nice to
Vanessa?
see
I'm glad that Jeff mentioned that New Year's Eve scene when he stuffs his coat, like somewhere in the, I think he stuffed it in the bookshelf. But on his way out, if he didn't give a
Grab that
shit
coat.
about the coat or the gifts that Norma Desmond gave him, he would have just left his coat there. But on the way out of the apartment, he grabs it and then leaves. So
It's
you know
But
cold.
that this
it's raining
guy-
though.
He doesn't want to mess up the tux.
So what, man? He's a man. He's a guy. Who cares if his hair gets wet? Doesn't matter if it's raining. But yeah, he grabs the coat before he leaves. He doesn't leave it there. So you know that he is enjoying all these gifts that she gave him, despite what he's saying. Oh, I don't want it. Yes, you do.
He certainly had enough pomade in his hair to slick off any water that hit him.
You know, I have to say, Dan, though, I'll get to you in a second. But Vanessa said, and Jeff, that moment was the moment that I thought, okay, he really is a cad. I'll just go with that vernacular, right? Because he was just introduced to his friend's girlfriend and asked to stay on his couch and was making a move on her in front of his friend right there with no care for anything because he was so needing affection, right? At that moment, he's like, I've got to get out of here. I got to get me a girl. And so, but then he gets the call. He realizes his ticket is about to be punched. He grabs that material coat and he runs to the woman and he lays a smacker on her. I just said to do that. Yeah, so I think that was a pivotal scene too.
Yeah.
Jen?
Well, Joe's a total jerk, but I don't see Norma as a femme fatale. I think she truly cares about Joe in her own sad, pathetic way. She only knows how to get people by giving them things, buying things. She's using her money to give him possessions and to bind him to her. But I do think there are moments in the film where, yes, she does care about Joe. And I think that makes it more powerful at the end when she reaches a point where she kills him because he's going to leave her behind and she cannot stand that. I want to make her into a femme fatale, but I can't. And that takes it out of the noir because she truly does care about him in her own sad way.
Excellent. Excellent.
Now, I'm sorry, I forgot your first name. Is it Gary? Made a good point in the
Oh, Greg. Greg. Yeah,
Greg, sorry. Yes, hi, Greg. But yeah, Greg made a great point in the chat about the gold chain grabbing the doorknob as he was leaving, keeping him from leaving so quickly. That was a pivotal moment too. I think the little nuances that come up with that are really, really interesting. Someone else, oh, Bruce, did you have, no, someone else had anything?
Yeah, Bruce.
Hey, Bruce, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm going back to the femme fatale. If we're going to find a femme fatale, someone mentioned earlier that Hollywood itself as an entity would be a great candidate for femme fatale. And I think, you know, we talk about Hollywood chews up and spits out the stars, and we see that. So who really got what they wanted in this whole scenario? And I think Hollywood did, because Hollywood ended up with another scandal for a silent film star. And that tends to feed the Hollywood machine and the press machine. And so if we're looking for a femme fatale, if we if we want to go down that noir, I was going to say road, but I'm going to say boulevard.
Boulevard, yeah.
Thank you. Then I think Hollywood is a very, very good candidate for that.
Agreed.
But I would agree that Norma is not.
Jan, is your hand still up, or did you have another question? Oh, okay. I'm interested in your take, Andy, and why you chose this film and for Noirvember. Like, what about it made it more for you?
I kind of see it somewhat as a film noir in that, as someone mentioned earlier, there is a crime. It doesn't occur until the very end, unless you want to count the very beginning as the prelude to that crime. It is about, as many noir films are, it's about someone trapped in a situation they can't escape. It can be of that character's own making, but it can also devolve into something that just spins totally out of control, which I think it does for Joe Gillis. Some of this he did bring upon himself, maybe all of this he brought upon himself, but he is definitely in a situation where he cannot control the events like he wants to, and it does end in a tragic way for him. So for me, I mean, I wouldn't put this as a 100% USDA approved film noir, but for me, I really don't have a problem putting it in that category.
Great. Debbie?
I have no problem with putting it in the category of film noir, and also acknowledging that other tropes from other genres are in this movie as well: horror, black comedy, melodrama. But if Eddie Muller is to be believed, not every film noir has a femme fatale.
Mhm.
So we don't really need a
Exactly.
femme fatale to have a film noir.
No, you don't.
And everybody in this movie, in a sense, loses. I mean, if you take it, if you take it that she does devolve into madness at that point. And I mean, the look on Hedda Hopper's face, it just kind of says, this is too much. As if anything could be too much for Hollywood, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, I do think it does fall within film noir parameters to some degree.
Yeah. Great. And
Odie
so great
makes a
comments
great
on that.
comment in the chat that every film noir does have a system that is out to get the characters. And yeah, totally in agreement with that.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. Cool. Bill, I'm Bruce. I'm sorry.
Am I wrong or hypersensitive to see the super strong parallel between Joe Gillis as a name and Jake Geddes as a name?
Yes. No.
Okay, I'm just wondering if Chinatown borrowed heavily, or
Ooh.
no, I'm gonna stick with borrowed heavily.
Yeah, I never thought about that, to be honest.
It's very close.
I always think of Joe Gideon. Joe Gideon is the character and all that jazz. He's the Bob Fosse stand-in.
Hmm.
And Joe Gideon and Joe Gillis sound very much alike, and I'm sure that's intentional on Fosse's part. And if you think about it, Hollywood is to Sunset Boulevard, what the theater is to all that jazz.
Yeah, great point.
Bruce Willis. No. Jeff, go ahead.
What? How did Bruce Willis get into this?
It was just, rhyming. That's what
Oh,
it was.
okay.
Because it's a Christmas movie.
There you go. All right.
I just wanted to just kind of jump off the track a tiny bit here, as we haven't talked much about von Stroheim and Max. And I always take it as a sign of a good or great movie that you'd like to know what happens to the other people or their story. And I can't think of hardly a better example in any movie anywhere ever than I'd love to see how Max got to where he is. I'd love to see his story because I think he's so central to this. He's in the background, but he has obviously this great, insane devotion to Norma, even though plainly she's insane and deluded, but he is so dedicated that he basically devotes his life to propping up this image she has of herself. So I always thought that was a fascinating character.
Yeah.
I think he's the saddest character in the film, and the only joy he gets, I think, out of the whole film is at the end when she's coming down the stairs and he's being the director one more time, and he gets to see her in her glory. It's such that last scene, it depends on how you look at it. It can be hilarious, it can be tragic, and it can be horrifying. But I'm glad you brought up von Stroheim because he is such a fascinating character. We haven't looked at any of his films on this discussion, and I don't even know if any of his films are playing on Canopy, but he is not only a director, but a Hollywood figure that is definitely worth exploring. So I'm glad you brought him up, Jeff. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say about von Stroheim, his performance or his career or anything about him. He's certainly worth discussing.
I think someone said that he was having a good time playing this part, and I think he is. He's having a wonderful time turning his own image on his ear, and all the meta stuff before things are meta that's happening in Sunset Boulevard. He's clearly enjoying that. As far as his character goes, you know, in my little conspiracy rereading, I said he is the bad part of Joe Gillis's screenplay. That he's the Deus Ex Machina who's just roaming around. There's really no reason for him to be here. But in the context of the actual movie, you know, it seems like he's in love with Norma and he's willing to hang around in the hopes that maybe she'll realize that he's still in love with her. So I said he's like the Ralph Bellamy character. You know, Ralph Bellamy always is roaming around and he never gets the girl. And not even in Disorderlies with the fat boys, he still doesn't get the girl. So that's the way I kind of saw Max. He's just, like you said, he is a tragic figure in this kind of movie. Maybe he could be the Peter Lorre character in a more straightforward noir type thing.
Yeah,
Great, that's great. Bruce, Bruce.
He said something in the movie, the Max character, when he said, "I asked to come back," and I wonder, because I don't know. Again, might be a reach, but there were 3 great directors at the time, and you know, I guess that's a little bit more forgiving than he left directing for a reason. Either he wasn't as good as DeMille or what have you. I kind of saw a parallel between him and Joe a little bit, in that if he had no other options, if Hollywood was letting him down, where can his meal ticket be? His meal ticket could be with Norma, even if it was just simply as her driver, or, you know, clearing out, wiping off the Marie Antoinette champagne glasses at New Year's Eve. He at least had a role and he was being taken care of in some way. So I don't know if I read too much into that or not, but I did see a slight, maybe not a parallel, but a little intersection at times with those 2 characters.
Okay.
Go ahead, Greg.
Thanks. And actually, von Stroheim was fired from directing Queen Kelly in the middle, which is when Swanson also quit the film. And he was notorious for going over budget and over time with his films. And so he was really avoided by studios after that. So he had a kind of a down period.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah, this von Stroheim, if we ever, we will probably never see a fully restored, complete version of his film Greed, which does show up from time to time. Sometimes it's been on the Criterion Channel. I would love to see it on Canopy, and if it's on there, I would discuss that in a second. Greed is just a fascinating film. Foolish Wives is a film that's pretty readily available on DVD. I don't know if our library has it or not, but everything we're saying about von Stroheim is true. I mean, the guy was a genius, but he didn't know when to stop. I mean, I think Greed originally ran for 8.5 hours, 9 hours. There was just no stopping him. But you know, his genius is certainly on display in all of the films I've seen from him. I think my mission is going to be find an Erich von Stroheim film for us to discuss on Canopy.
We'll have to figure that out.
We'll have to figure it out. Not a 9-hour
one. Anyone else have some thing they'd like to say? Bill, go ahead. And then Bruce.
So it was particularly sad that not only was he hanging around, but at one of the last things he said was that he had been her first husband. And so to hang around after that, and she had 3 husbands, if I remember right. So he'd been hanging around for a long time after being a husband. I mean, that's pretty sad for him.
It is sad.
It was interesting too, because like I said, this is the second time I watched it, and knowing that after the first one and knowing that it's her husband, watching him in the film and seeing how he was ever present, like and over the shoulder, almost in every scene where Joe and Norma were together. And I think, I don't know, maybe I read it in like one of the comments, or maybe I read it in your article, Odie, about, the fact that he said that it was the doorknobs were taken off for her safety, so they couldn't lock the door. But how interesting it was, all of the bedroom doors that had no doorknob, so he could spy in there like that. It was his character is what took it into the kind of horror thriller type part of him. Just his very presence, and that moment when Joe came back from being with Betty, and he was standing in the shadows. I was watching the film in my room with the lights out and all that stuff, because I wanted to kind of pretend that that theater feeling, and that was creepy. It was like Nosferatu creepy for me. It was like, and the music was amazing. We haven't talked about the music either, and we usually get into that, but the score and there was a lot of melodramatic horror type music in this movie as well. So I can certainly see that. And how'd she get the gun? Yes, Jerry, how'd she get the gun? If they're taking away all the razors and everything else, how'd she get that gun under her ex-husband's face?
Okay, does anybody remember?
No. Oh, Jen? Do you?
I don't remember that, but I'm glad you mentioned the score, because Waxman was a good friend of Wilder going back to Germany before they both fled, before Hitler took over. And Waxman did the score for Bride of Frankenstein.
Makes
And
sense.
and you can see that touch in all of this.
Certainly.
Yeah, it's a tremendous score, and he won the Oscar for this for a reason. It's and all of his work is just exemplary. Okay, so
Andy, what's the
where'd she
story
get the
about the
gun? I can't remember. I thought that she sent someone, but that can't be right.
But who would she send? She would send Max, and Max would get her a gun.
Did Max get it? I can't remember.
I don't
Does
think.
anybody? Odie, do you
She didn't
remember?
say. I don't think.
I thought it was in her drawer, and maybe Max put it there. Max could be the puppet master here, if you think about it.
Yeah.
In my piece, I said they took all the doorknobs, but they should have taken the gun.
Yeah.
The doorknobs weren't the scary part.
Exactly.
So if the gun, I think it's just left to her own devices, but I'm pretty sure maybe she hid it, but why would she hide a gun? But this is the 50s, this is 1950, so everybody could have a gun. She's a star,
Yeah, that's true. And if he was so concerned about razors and protecting himself, why not take Joe's razors out of the bathroom that she allegedly cut her wrists with, but had the strength to pull his head down to kill someone? I have moments about this movie now that we can watch it in a different eye. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I wanted to ask Odie, because if I remember correctly in your article, you questioned whether she actually tried to commit suicide.
Yeah, I still, even in the regular reading that I have, I still am not sure that's true. I think it was a point of Max getting Joe to come back, make him guilty. Madame has slit her wrists. It doesn't. And then Wilder, being notorious detail-oriented person, that director that he is, not once do you ever notice that Norma Desmond's wrists look like they've ever been slit at all. And there's plenty of, right after New Year's Eve, I think there's a pool scene where she's there and she's dressed in her, bathing suit, and her arms, I think she has like a bracelet or something on her arms. That's what drew me to her wrists. And it made me think of, this is a ploy, that she didn't slit her wrists at all. She just, and Joe doesn't even question her injury, when he comes back. So I'm wondering if, again, the unreliable narrator comes into play as a point of sympathy. Yeah, I had to sleep with her because she slit her wrists and I felt guilty.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Oh, go Bill last and Bruce.
So on a completely different note, who knew that Jack Webb had done something before Dragnet?
It took me 5 or 10 minutes of looking at him deeply to say, I know that face. I know that face.
And to do something where he almost plays a cool character.
He doesn't sound like Jack, like Joe Friday at all.
Not at all.
No, I'm glad you mentioned Jack Webb. Yeah, he's quite a guy.
Bruce?
A couple things that I noticed. I was hooked into this movie with the beginning title cards. Just panning down to see Sunset Boulevard spray painted on the curb. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting thing. And then watching the inverse Star Wars introduction of the title cards. I don't know if Star Wars was some sort of homage to this or what, but just the title cards didn't move, but the background behind it moved. I thought that, like, okay, right away, I think I've got something for this. And the lead car of the police, there were 2 motorcycles and then some cars. The lead car was a 1947 Ford business coupe, which my uncle had one. So I gotta watch the rest of this movie now. Come for the cars, stay for the camp. I thought watching Gloria Swanson, I thought it was amazing. From I noticed the hand, whether it was when she was moving or when she was sitting on her divan with her hand clapped around her knee. It just that claw, the sneer. It's like I used to teach chemistry. So one of the little things we talked about was you can take steam, and steam is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. If you drop it 1 degree, it's just really hot water. It's not steam. And I think this was like 1 degree below camp. It's not camp, but it's just 1 degree below it. It's something else. It's good acting. It's what have you. Had it gone a little bit further, it would have been campy, but it wasn't. I think her acting was just wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Also in Star Wars, it pans down. The camera pans down after the title.
Right.
And it pans down to the spaceship. So I'm sure Lucas did that on purpose in some regard.
Yeah,
I
love that imagery.
There are a lot of opportunities for other movies that I've seen, either to coincidentally or purposely pay homage to Sunset Boulevard.
And shockingly, Tiny Toon Adventures, the cartoon that Warner Brothers did back in the 90s, they did an homage to Sunset Boulevard called Sepulveda Boulevard. And it's actually really, really good.
It's really
if you know anything about
He's hitting all the marks. It was the best. Let's see if I got a picture of I can't.
Elmira is Norma Desmond, and she's this obsessive character who loves animals and is going after the animals in the show. So they play up on taking all these characters with their Tiny Toon Adventures characteristics and plugging them into a serious iteration of Sunset Boulevard. They're not mocking it at all. They're basically plugging them into it, and it becomes a situation. The comedy is that these characters are playing the part in the movie that you know, and it even pans down to the gutter at the end with the character going into the gutter, and it says Sepulveda Boulevard. So someone else thought of some of the things that we've been talking about here, and they did a cartoon that probably no kid understood what was going on because they would never have seen Sunset Boulevard.
No. Wow, I've got to see that. I've got to find that.
It's awesome. I'm gonna see if I can. Here's a video.
Great.
No,
great.
That's not it. That's actually a video of Carol Burnett as Nora Desmond.
Yeah, I want to rewatch that too. I haven't seen that in years.
She's done it in a couple of different sketches, and it's classic. And me talking about the beauty marks is what did it for me, because beauty marks on your eyelids, and it just great, just great. Great work. I'm trying to find. I don't see Von Strandheim and Canopy at all. I've been looking for that while we've been talking, and it's not here. So we'll just have to lobby for that, or
Yeah, I'll contact Canopy and tell them to get on it.
Yes,
Because
definitely.
we need von Stroheim.
I mean, if they're bringing back so many silent films, they're doing a really good
Yeah,
job
yeah.
of curating that collection.
Yeah.
That I think it's just a good idea to try to get that.
And I know Foolish Wives is a Kino release, and they do a lot of Kino
Yeah.
on Canopy. So hopefully it's on the way.
Andy,
Okay, so
Andy, next time you talk to Canopy, could you have them bring back Wings from 1927? They took it. I got to watch it.
I wasn't able to see it either, and I wanted to because I've never seen it.
Yeah,
it may be streaming in other places. I thought it was on Amazon at one time. It's not on there.
it might. It's not now. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
I looked. Yeah,
I would like to see that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're a little bit over 8 o'clock. I mean, we can certainly keep this going. And I was going to do some recommendations, but I want to hear some recommendations from you guys as well. But before we do that, does anybody else have any last words about Sunset Boulevard?
Yeah.
Jeff.
Well, I just kind of wanted to echo what Bruce was talking about with Swanson. I think the first time I watched this movie, I was really off put by her in that, because I just thought, like, what's she doing up there? You know, what's this and it's the pictures that got small. And in subsequent viewings, I started to appreciate her a lot more, because I realized that she is always performing. Like, there's no distinction for her between her on-screen persona and real life. And now I look at it and I say, and that is such an interesting and right up to the edge, like you say, Bruce, performance. But it could so easily be farce, but it just somehow works right. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me give you a couple of recommendations, and then I want to see what recommendations you might have. First off, I have The Stuntman, which takes another scrutinizing look at Hollywood. This one 30 years later in 1980. The Stuntman stars Peter O'Toole as a movie director who hires a stuntman who is wanted for murder. It's a wild one, and this is available on Canopy. Next up is Sullivan's Travels from 1941. Joel McCrea stars as a movie director who decides to experience life as a homeless person in order to make more socially relevant movies. And this is a wild comedy that really sticks its finger in the eye of Hollywood. It also stars Veronica Lake and is a film we watched and discussed in person a few years ago. Sullivan's Travels is not on Canopy, but it is on DVD in the library system. And if you live outside of Anne Arundel County, I bet it's in your library system as well. And finally, a film that's light and a bit kinder to Tinseltown, and that is Paris When It Sizzles from 1964. William Holden plays, hey, a screenwriter. And he has to come up with a workable screenplay in 3 days, and he's got nothing. But his secretary, played by Audrey Hepburn, has plenty of ideas. Are they any good? You'll have to watch it to find out, and it is on Canopy. Anybody else have any recommendations?
Okay, so we've got Vanessa, then Jeff.
I have a recommendation, but it's not a film, it's a book. So I read Gloria Swanson's memoir called Swanson on Swanson for the first time last year. And it is the best classic film book I have ever read. And I've read a lot of them. Andy knows this. And guys, I swear, before reading that book, obviously I knew who Gloria Swanson was, but I never really appreciated her or her work until I had read the book. It is incredible. And this woman was an absolute legend. And I encourage you guys, if you can get your hands on that book, please, please read it. It is amazing.
Vanessa, I remember when you reviewed that and I saw it on Twitter, and like she says, she reads a lot of books about movies, and I never saw any higher praise from her than for that book. So thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, we had some others.
Yeah, Jeff and Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know whether these are on Canopy or not, possibly not, but I just wanted to, these are also movie-related movies. Both sour as hell about Hollywood. and they're very similar. One is Robert Alter's is The Big Knife from, I think it's late 50s somewhere, about an action actor who wants to get out of Hollywood and basically just gets boxed in, can't escape. Very great movie, very sour. The other one is the Coen brothers, Bart and Fink, which is probably in my top 5 all time. Just a brilliant movie, and with an ending that is just an absolute sledgehammer and unforgettable once you've seen it. So yeah, The Big Knife and Bart and Fink.
Yeah, 2 good ones. Okay, who's next?
Chuck.
Okay, I have a movie recommendation and a book. For the movie is another cynical movie about Hollywood from 1950 as well, Nicholas Ray's In a Lonely Place. I would definitely highly recommend that. And then as far as one of my favorite books on Billy Wilder, the book called Conversations with Wilder, written by, it's conversations between Billy Wilder and filmmaker Cameron Crowe, a book of interviews he did. I believe it came out in the 90s sometime. It's a really, really interesting look. Wilder has a lot of interesting insights into his filmmaking career, so I would recommend that.
Great.
Awesome.
I want to jump in real quick and recommend book because Chuck reminded me of it. And this is a book about Wilder and his career, Some Like It Wilder, The Life and Controversial Films of Billy Wilder. And this is a book that is published by Kentucky, University Press of Kentucky, and they're having a sale right now. I don't know if this is involved in the sale, but, and I've only read the parts about Sunset Boulevard and maybe a couple other things, but I highly recommend that. Who's next?
Anyone else?
Can I jump in?
Sure, absolutely, sure.
Joe McBride just has a book out about Billy Wilder right now. I'm reading it. It's called Billy Wilder Dancing on the Edge. It just came out a couple of weeks ago. And so far it's great. You know, Joseph McBride writes really good books about film. So it's maybe worth looking at. I mean, as far as I haven't gotten that far in it, but I think it's fascinating what I've read so far. If we're going to talk about bitter movies about Hollywood, you can't forget SOB.
Yeah.
The Blake Edwards movie that I snuck into because it was rated R. And what were we sorry? Anyway, no.
I feel you. No, that's Joe McBride is a terrific writer. I'm glad you mentioned that, and I haven't. I need to pick that up as well. Anything by Joe McBride is worth reading.
There were so many other better rated R movies to sneak into, Odie.
You know why we were sneaking into SOB.
I know why.
I know why.
SOB.
Yeah. Anyway.
Jan,
that's why they didn't. Did you have your hand up still, Jan?
Yeah, I didn't know if you saw that one, Darnice.
That's okay. For anybody who collects home video, if you can see this, let's see. 1 second.
Camera is off.
There we go. If you collect home video, Fury, the Fritz Lang movie, is now on Blu-ray. Way ahead of its time. What a gutsy film. You should give this a try. There's a terrific pre-code Stanwyck now on Blu-ray from Warner Archive. Ladies they talk about. And then one of the funniest movies ever made is W.C. Fields' It's a Gift, which is just marvelous. Well worth buying.
Interesting.
Excellent. Always excellent choices from Jan. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else?
All right. Well, everybody, that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's great to see Margaret and great to see Odie. I think both of you are first-time folks with us, and we hope you will come back. And I hope to see everyone for the December 3rd movie. We're going to talk about Monsieur Hulot's Holiday. So please do sign up for that. And I will see you soon. Take care. Have a great
Happy
Noirvember.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
And have a
Hope
happy
you enjoy.
Thanksgiving as well.
And
Eat
thanks
and
to you,
talk
Andy, I
movies.
now have like 13 movies in my top 5.
There's always room for more.
Absolutely. Yes. Take care, everybody.
And
Thanks,
a good
Bruce.
pile that keeps growing.
Take care.
Yeah, it does keep growing. Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, everybody.
Awesome.